Hey, Mikey, how's it going?
Oh, there you are. Good, bud. Good. All right, good stuff. We've actually, okay, we've got a good number of people here for this, so this will be fun. All right.
Wow. Yes.
Okay, let me just grab my list here. Okay, so I'm sure most of you know that today we'll be speaking with Tyler Prescott. So Tyler is the head coach of the NYTA Junior Tennis Academy, which currently has over 300 students. Tyler is the assistant manager of the NYTA Winter Tennis Club, which has 1,750 members and 3 bubbled sites. Tyler was a gold medalist twice at the Canada Games as the coach of the Ontario team and is the under 18 Team Ontario coach for Team Ontario at the Nationals. Tyler is the winner of numerous Tennis Canada Excellence Awards and has developed numerous national and ITF champions. Tyler is also the course facilitator for the Coach 2 and Coach 3 with Tennis Canada and is a certified high performance Coach 4. Tyler has been working in high performance tennis now for almost 30 years. So congrats on quite the resume there, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, me and Tyler, I actually had the pleasure of doing my my level 4 with Tyler this past year and the year before that. So that was quite the experience to get to spend that time together.
Yeah, it was lots of fun.
Yeah. So I've kind of got a list of questions for you here that we can go through, and then hopefully at the end we have some time if some of the players or parents have any questions for you as well.
For sure.
So obviously I just went over your impressive resume there, but basically, yeah, we went over your background. You've been involved in coaching in Ontario for almost 30 years now. You work at the NYTA. Is there anything else that I kind of missed on that?
No, you covered a lot there. That was all pretty much about my background. But some of the things that we shared together was obviously traveling the last 5 years together to ITF tournaments, which I think is a big part of your background and mine. The learning that we did at ITFs in different places, like all over the world, taking players to these type of tournaments. So it doesn't really show up on your background, but it's a real learning experience. So that's something that
yeah, unfortunately, I was on the losing end of our last encounter in Rapunzel. Yeah, my student lost to your student, but that was a great tournament actually, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. So well done to you and Jada at that tournament. That was a great result there.
Yeah, that was lots of fun. Yeah, I was actually supposed to be doing the Coach 3 that week, and I got moved over to Rapunzel, which was great because we just started the new Coach 3 today. It was all done by Zoom all morning. And so much of it is like getting those experiences at these ITF tournaments, the G1s, and getting a sense what a world-class junior looks like. So that's the challenge we have right now in COVID is the kids don't get out to play tournaments and they don't get a sense of where their game really is at compared to other kids in the world.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, here's a question for you. What motivates you to continue to work so hard developing these great juniors that come out of your program?
Well, the first thing is for me, a professional is someone that actually makes money in pro tennis. So I've had players that get get ATP or WTA points, but I didn't feel like they made a living in tennis. So my number one objective is to make a pro, and I haven't been successful at doing that. So for me, it's like someone in the top 75 or top 50 that are making income being a professional tennis player. So that's my number one goal. The other thing is that I love winning. I hate losing, and I think everyone has to have a little bit of that in them. So that motivates me as well, as I want my players to win. I want them to be successful and I want them to achieve their goals. The other thing is just recently I started working with some younger kids. What motivates me is that the young kids really improve really, really fast. So I like to see the kids grow and get better. So I find it fun. It's, when you come to work every day, it's not the same job I have every day or other coaches. Every day is a little different. We deal with different players. We see them grow. We see them get better. We deal with other coaches. Not one day is the same. So that's one thing that really motivates me. I could never do a job like here in the back office where they're doing accounting and they're doing the same thing every day. I like different things to happen. So working with kids, every single one of those kids on the screen there, I recognize some of them. They all have a different identity and it's fun to play with them, work with them and figure things out.
Absolutely.
The other thing that motivates me is I love coaching tennis. There's no boss. I don't have a boss. You're on your court by yourself doing your thing. So there's lots of, traveling I mentioned to you. And of course, if you coach tennis, unfortunately in COVID, there can be financial rewards to tennis as well too. So it's lots of things motivate me.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really cool, that the part you mentioned about working with the younger kids and how malleable they are and how fast they can improve, and what an impact a coach like you can have on those young kids. So I think that's really special that you're a part of that.
And the other thing, I don't know if it's correct or right or not, but I do live through the kids, and I know that I know it might be not the best thing because I wasn't a world-class tennis player myself. I was good, but not great. And I find that I throw myself at it because I want those kids. It's not good to live through them because it's still their tennis. So you got to find a little bit of a boundary, but I really take their wins and losses. I feel like we're playing it together. So it's obviously motivates me to also get them to their highest levels possible.
Yeah, I think how involved you are is one of the things that makes you a really great coach and a really special coach. And it's the kids that work with you, they're really lucky to have someone so involved.
Thanks, Mike.
What are some of the differences you have seen in juniors from today to 15 years ago? And that could be technically, that could be tactically, physically, just anything that maybe you've seen evolve over the past 10, 15 years.
In the last 15 years, I'll deal technically first. And the last 15 years, I've worked pretty much with 90% girls. I used to work with a lot of guys before in Milos's generation, but now I work mostly with girls. And what I've seen when it comes to technically, I find that in the girls' tennis, they can play anywhere. Girls can, like guys have been doing it for 10 years. So girls can come to net, they can transition, they can play from the baseline. They're very comfortable all over the tennis court this generation, where in the past, I felt like a lot of the players I would see would just kind of push and win. So under 12, for example, if you ran and you played in the fifth window, you could have success that way. But now the kids look like mini pros. So especially in the girls' tennis, they can play from anywhere. Tactically, like I mentioned, they look like little pros. I do have a thing at my club that some of the kids I know are tuning in now. They know it drives me nuts. Is I have a little definition of consistency, and some of the things I've seen happen with my players is that I know in Tennis Canada, we just had this debate today in the Coach 3. It's like, oh, do we want our under 12s to be able to put one more ball in the court and be consistent? I said, no. My definition of consistency is someone that's able to attack, move the person, make the ball, work on patterns. So this is what I'm seeing in the under 12 level now is that they're just not consistent pushing balls back in the tennis court. They're like little pros, and they have patterns and they can play. They're playing offense and defense, where in the past, 15 years ago, I thought most of the tennis is neutral. I think it's really, really, I see a lot of the young kids out there. That's a huge thing. And I know that I get upset with my players when they do go play on their own. I know for a fact they're rallying. And that word is like a swear word in my academy. It's I want you to go practice with your friends, but I want you to move the person. I want you to make the ball shoot through them. But because I see when they come back, they went back to that tennis from 15 years ago. So today, finally, in the Coach 3, we realized that the word consistency, it doesn't just have to be just rallying. It can be moving the person with consistency. It can be executing patterns with consistency. So I think that tennis now is a lot of attack and defend, and 15 years ago was a lot of neutral tennis. That's something that I noticed when I was traveling too. So that's something I've noticed. But the biggest challenge now, I think, is now I'll deal with some physical part of the school. No one's in school right now. Our club is lucky because we get to go into schools and we do schools programs. And 15 years ago, when these kids went to school, they would do soccer, basketball. They do all these different sports and develop all these different skills. And they'd have all these different physical literacy skills. But now I watched a couple of gym classes even before COVID, and I wouldn't even want to be in gym. It was like boring. They weren't doing anything. So now this generation now, we have to take on all that physical work, all the physical literacy skills. I saw a little fitness going on before we came out here, which is great. So this is a big change, that's on us now. The last thing is mental, which is the most important part. I think that's the part I focus on in my development as a coach, is the mental aspect of tennis. and it's become a massive challenge. I know Mike and I, we were traveling, and it would drive me nuts. You'd be at the dinner table and the girls are texting each other and they're at the same table. And I was like, it's great that we have the cell phones. It's great that we have all of the videos and stats available to us, but it's become a real challenge for coaches, and I feel for the players. A lot of the young players I find now, they're very interested in their image, their Instagram postings, and that's become the challenge now compared to before. 15 years ago, none of my kids showed up with a phone. None of them had those kind of instruments. They just came and played. So that's a big change now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to touch on. I think the attention span of the kids is something that maybe needs to be addressed, and finding ways to improve that part of their development. And then kind of the part you touched on in terms of the physicality, how players are more physical these days. But I think you're right, the tennis programs play a large role in that, because I think the physical development is a little bit different in the schools these days compared to what it was when maybe you and me went to school. So I think
Exactly.
that's a great part to touch on too. And obviously with the players playing much more physical tennis and being able to cover more of the court, being faster, being stronger, and now they're, like you said, the females are able to play more of an all-court game. I think the coaching has improved, and the players are able to, they're more comfortable to come up to the net, to execute their volleys, execute their approach shots, and understand those patterns as well.
I mean, just my opinion, but I remember talking to a guy in the States, and he said the game's really changing. He goes, like, we were talking about kids in school before, they did all those activities. Now we get two types of kids. I also look after 20 recreational clubs here in North York, and the recreational programs are dying, and the high performance programs are growing. And what's happening now is when we get kids, whether they're 11 or 12 in high performance, that they have that personal trainer, they have the psychologist, they have all these little pieces here. They're like mini pros, like I mentioned, under 12. So this is this generation we have now. And as coaches, it's almost like we're driving the bus to manage the psychologist, manage the fitness person, manage the physio, manage the doctor, manage the hitting partner. So it's a juggling act. Where 15 years ago, the coach did everything. They were the fitness guy. They were the psych. They did everything for that player.
Right.
So that's a change now too.
That's great. That was a really in-depth answer. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your own coaching philosophy. I mean, you've already touched on quite a few things that could have to do with that, but maybe there's something that you want to talk about.
Sure. Just a few things that stick out for me. It's what I've learned. And like I said, we're learning every single day. Is that when someone comes to the door for the first time, I always try and find what's good in the person. And I'm, like I mentioned to you, the best, what I noticed about Mike, I'm sure you can agree with this, winning on the tour, it's nice to have a great forehand stuff, but it all comes down to your mental game. And that's where I'm spending so much time trying to figure things out, reading books, researching, and making players mentally tough. And whenever I start a lesson, it's always about the mental part first, then we grow from there. But like the first thing is the player. I always try and look for the good in the player. When I'm certifying a lot of coaches, when the player comes in, they tell me all the negative things about the player. And I said, well, that person's never going to have any confidence if you can't find the good in them. And it's if once you start to find the good in them, then you can start to build a game style around what makes them good. And obviously they're going to have confidence and be able to perform under pressure. So I think number one is the player. It's got to be all about the player and finding the good in the player. Then the next challenge is time. Like we mentioned with cell phones and the kids, like I'm sure they all have cell phones. I used to have a saying, when a kid has a cell phone, as soon as I see them walking with a cell phone, I know their ranking's going to drop 30 spots. It was just a joke I used to have at NYTA. I'm like, oh God, she's got a cell phone. And it's like, there goes the ranking. I mean, I know it's a tool, it can be used for things, but anyway, back to what we said before. And it's just, the cell phone is instant gratification. Everyone's buying new phones to make it faster. You need to be very patient to be a professional tennis player. You need to put in 10, 15 years. So you better enjoy the process. I see so many players training out there that hate what they're doing. Their parents put pressure on them. But I mean, you better love what you're doing. If you want to be pro, you're looking at 12, 14 years of doing what you want to do. So I think time is very important, and it's very important to be patient. The last part is, another one is that there's a partnership. I made a lot of mistakes coaching. It's the player and the coach go together, and they're both responsible for different things. I feel like the coach has to pass on knowledge. They have to create values, make sure the person's a performer, they come ready to work. I think the coach has to give the person confidence and belief in themselves and the players. They have to develop the character. I feel like every player on tour, when you had Arsenal against Jada, both of them kind of had a brand, and they're playing each other. And when I see Arsenal play, I know you did great work with her, Mike. It's like she had a kind of style, right? And then Jada has a style, and this person has a style. So it's like their characters and styles play each other. So it's very important that you create that. The coach creates that brand and style in the player. Um, and of course, I think the coach has to be able to create a player that can hold up under pressure. If you want to play professional tennis, we're tired of seeing Canadian tennis players looking very pretty, but they can't hold up under pressure. So there's lots of information out there that you can get to read, and I can pass it on to the kids later. Lastly, the kids, the players, what are they responsible for? I think they're responsible for having good work ethic, being a good person themselves, being focused. And I really think the player has to want to win. If they don't want to win, the coach can only do so much. And you got to be a little bit of a perfectionist. Every player I saw that does well on the tour or wins ITFs or wins nationals, they're perfectionists. They're perfectionists in their own game. They go work on their own game, and they care about their own game. So you can go too far with being a perfectionist where it hurts you, but there's a balance there for sure. Where I think it's if you're a little bit of a perfectionist, then you can manage yourself. And I guess the fifth thing is just one more thing. It's um, I talked about this with my son on Friday about hockey, but I have four of my own kids. So I tell this is just one thing, my opinion. Right now, if you look at what the pros are doing, it's my last little part about my philosophy. If you can't do more than what the pros are doing now, you have no chance of being a professional tennis player, because tennis is getting more difficult. If they serve at 115 with movement, you need to be 120 with more movement. If they make their ball explode, you got to make it explode more. I think that you have to do more. We have to be faster because the game, like I said, is getting more difficult. So if you can't be better, right? If your goal is not to be better than Adele, be better than Serena, then you have no chance of being pro because the game is changing and it's getting better. So that's just one of my philosophies there.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of good stuff. And I think having high standards for these young individuals, like you said, I mean, these guys are just raising the bar all the time. So I think having high standards, it's kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Who are some of the top players you have worked with over the years, and what made them special or different from the others?
There's been so many. Like I said, in the last 15 years, I think if you're a female, I pretty much coached you in Toronto. And I mean, one, we mentioned Jada, and it was just and there's good and bad with every player that I've coached, but the good things is that Jada had phenomenal timing, and she taught me to be fearless. She would go for shots under pressure. I couldn't believe she was going for them. I never would have went for that shot, but she did, and she taught me you have to have a going for it attitude under pressure. It doesn't mean you're reckless. It means that you're going for a safe target, but you're really going after it. There's Erica, a girl that I really respect a lot. It's a girl that was very, very small. She was very weak, and the other girls kind of didn't really want to play with her. And then all of a sudden, like I told her to keep working, and this girl has work ethic like you wouldn't believe, and great character. Well, she won provincial. She got a full scholarship this year, so that's a massive success because she maximized her potential, which she actually has. I mean, there's tons. There's Scarlett, who would run for every single ball and is one of the nicest people you've ever met. And Rhea Verma, if you remember her, just oozing with confidence. That's pretty much the only thing she has in her game. But it gets her a top scholarship and top 10 in Canada at one point. And not to mention, I'm just going through, and there's now all the younger, and there's Kristen Borland, Ashley Chang, but now I'm working with some young kids now, and they're very unique. I think the young kids I have right now are some of the best kids I've ever coached in my life. So I really think that there's real potential. And the reason I switched from coaching, I remember Mike seeing me on the tour all the time, and I had that group of players between 12 and 16. I had about 10 of them that I was traveling with, 10 to 15 of them. Now I go with the young ones, and it was just, like I said, they learn so fast. You can really shape their game style. You don't get any red flags in the future. It's a lot of fun. And you've
That's
coached
awesome.
fun yourself. My players are always playing your players, so it's like,
It's true.
I mean, it's you seem to coach a lot of females as well. I had Daniela play your players,
Yes.
Kristen Moore. It was always seemed to be our girls playing each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good generation, very strong generation. And you're right. Yeah, there was a lot of strong girls in Burlington and Oakville, and then you had a lot of
Mhm.
strong ones in Toronto too. So
Mhm.
yes, yeah, I definitely remember that.
That's why it was hard for you when you asked me about my philosophy, and I was like, I don't know. Like you talk to some other coaches, say this is my philosophy, and for me, it's always changing. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's just because I've had coached so many players, like hundreds of players, and it's you learn from each one, and then you kind of like you have your values, but you kind of adjust your philosophy a little bit,
Right. Yeah.
just based on what you've experienced, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, we're learning from them just as much as they learn from us. So it's always an
Exactly.
experience.
Yeah,
Okay, one more question from
sure.
me. What are some of the qualities you look for when developing top junior players?
Uh, First, what makes them special? I try and find out what makes them special as a player, and that's number one, because it's going to give them confidence and allow them to play under pressure. Are they willing to make sacrifices? So I find that the dropout rate's pretty high, and because they miss their friends and parties and vacations, and they're to be a professional tennis player, it's a sacrifice. And
Yes.
so you have to make those sacrifices. I want to see a player that's willing to make those sacrifices. And that player has to want to be number one or be a pro. Like if they don't want to be a pro, I'm really not interested in coaching you. I don't mean to be mean. It's just I have four of my own kids and I only have a limited amount of time. And I want to work with players that want to be pro. And that's it. That's one of my rules. And yeah, they have to be coachable. I think I've coached some players that had some success and they have to be a little bit humble. I feel they get too confident, they get too happy with themselves. Um, and they have to be an alien, of course. I tell this especially about boys tennis. In boys tennis, you got to be not normal. Like when we were on the tour, I remember you and I watching the girls. I was sitting by myself one time at IMG, and then the boys came on. I'm like, oh my god! Like it's just these guys are not normal. Like they can do everything. So for men's tennis, you have to be an absolutely alien. That means you come from another planet. Women's tennis, I think you have to be mentally tough and they're approaching men's tennis. They're playing like the men's game now, so you have to be able to do that. But having good character. Unfortunately, money is important in tennis. Not everyone gets picked up by Tennis Canada. Um, so it's important. It is important for families to have money, so kids can get exposed to traveling. They can afford travel. It does cost money, and the biggest obstacle I've found in tennis, which makes the decision whether I coach somebody or not, is the parents. I have a parent interview now, so you can get cut by parents. Not to be mean, but I've been you know I've gone down some bad roads where work with a player but doesn't work out with the parents. So everyone has to be on the same team there. So these are some of the things I look for in a player, like good parents. They want to work hard. They want to be number one, coachable, and they're willing to make sacrifices.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on some really good points there. Obviously, like the teamwork and being all encompassing with the student, with their family, with the coach, like to have everybody in line. I think that this is really important and this is really healthy for the athlete. And then
Mhm.
obviously the character of the child. I think for anybody to succeed kind of in anything, it takes some sort of special character.
Yeah.
And obviously tennis, it's such a challenging sport. It's very individualized and very secluded, and so the character of these children, I mean, it's really tough when you're out there all by yourself, and
Yeah.
your parents are watching. You're trying to perform, but you're thinking about what, maybe what's on their mind, and then you've got to figure out what's going on in the match mentally and tactically. And so I think that always poses a huge challenge for these kids. I don't know too many other sports that kind of throw them out there in that kind of situation, and ask them to deal with it. I mean, we see pros on TV who don't deal with those situations well, and then we ask a 12 or a 13-year-old to kind of deal with the same situation. So it's quite the task for these kids. So I think when you talk about character, yeah, I think it really requires something really special from the individual. And then the other part that I kind of got from that was the part where you talked about making sacrifices. I mean, we all know how much time it requires to spend on the court and in the gym, and, you know, working on your mental game, and then watching matches and going to tournaments. And, you know, maybe your coach asks you to read a book on the mental game. And, you know, it's like the amount of time. And then, you know, maybe they don't get to go to the family party or the school party, or on the weekend there's a birthday party, but they have a tournament, and then they have to travel and they have to miss school, and, you know, they have to keep up with their academics. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot of sacrifices that these young kids have to make, and hopefully they see all the benefits involved in this too. So
Yeah.
those were some really great points. I mean, in terms of the questions I had, I think you did a great job of answering anything that I wanted to kind of bring up for these kids. Basically, I'm going to turn it over to the audience a little bit. I think if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask Tyler, feel free to just, probably the best thing is to just type it into the chat. If you really want to ask in person, I'm not going to say no, like just use the raised hand feature. I think that's the best way. And then I can just ask you to unmute, and then you can shoot a question over to Tyler. So yeah, I think, and if you're in my program, then you better come up with a question, and it better be a good question. So my group is going to get on top of that pretty quick. But there's already a couple in the chat, so we can jump over those. And I think they're both kind of, they both seem to be along the same lines. They're more along the mental game. So one person has asked, how can you train your mind to not worry about pressure and fear?
How do you train your mind? Well, it depends on what's pressure and fear. Well, first of all, both people, you work on that in practice. I mean, pressure is always going to be there. It should be in your training and all your drills. Fear, I mean, I look at it as this match we're playing. There's a difference of 5-6 points. The other person's going to feel it as well. They're feeling the same amount of anxiety. We can talk about, so I mean, this is the game that you're actually playing. It's always going to be a 5-6 point difference, and you're going to lose a lot of matches. I had a player that was having anxiety attacks because she was tired of losing, and I said, would you like to be 25 in the world? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, if you're 25 in the world, that means you're Karlovic, and he lost more than 50% of his matches that made him 25 in the world. So you're going to be a loser anyway. So in tennis, I tell my players, let's get rid of the fear, because when you win a match, you only won by 6 points. And when you lost the match, you lost by 6 points. So get rid of the fear. So I make sure that when they win, people that are fearful, usually when they win, they get way too high. And when they lose, they get way too low. So I said, you know, when you win, that's my chance to say, hey, you only won by this. And when you lose, you only lost by this. But I mean, there's so much, you can go technical, tactical, physical, psychological when it comes to pressure. That's every lesson I do with a player. It's only based on pressure. I won't go on the court unless there's a pressure component. Your technique has to hold up under pressure. And if you want to know about pressure, I don't know if you can see this book. Can you see this book?
No, you know what? For some reason, your camera doesn't show.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why. Is it better? Okay, so I'll just tell you about it then.
I mean, I didn't mind that your camera didn't look. I mean, you look a hell of a lot better than me, so you're going to make me look bad if you put your camera on. So I didn't say anything. I just felt better this way.
Okay. Start video. Maybe I don't know what that does. Okay. Yeah, you know me in technology, Mike. Remember in the Coach 4, I was using a pad. So it's like, but the book is called The Pressure Principle by David Alfred. And I want any player there that wants to be pro, I want you to go out and read this book. And basically Louis Caillé, Bob Brett, a lot of the top coaches in the world have taken their technique and they've taken the mental part of it. They talk about fighter pilots. They talk about Navy SEALs. They talk about things they do to get through pressure. The other thing about this, he's a psychologist that's also, I don't know, Mike, if you read this book, The Pressure Principle by David Alfred.
Yeah, I'm just writing it in the chat for everybody. So anybody that wants to take a look at the book. So it's The Pressure Principle by
David Alford. David
Alford.
Alford.
Okay, perfect.
What's interesting about him, he's worked with Ronaldo. If everybody knows who Ronaldo, the soccer player, is, he's worked with professional golfers. He's worked with tennis players. And basically, he talks about technique that holds up under pressure. And that's important, obviously. He talks about tactics. I think you have tactics that have to hold up under pressure. And obviously, physically, there's physical things you can do in your training to hold up under pressure. And of course, the whole mental part, it's in this book. I recommend all the kids, and kids, even if you're like 11, 12, you can handle the information. I recommend it to a lot of my 12-year-olds. So, I mean, it's a really good book, and you'll like it because you guys can all relate to other athletes. So you can relate to all the different professional athletes that this gentleman has worked with. So it's really, I did some, my coach for when I was with Mike, I wrote the LTAD, my own LTAD, long-term development plan for kids, starting from U7, U9, U12, U13, and it all came from this and other resources. So I think it'll help you a lot with your fear when you read this book, and you can tell me what you think when you're done.
Awesome. So hopefully all you guys made a note about that book, and you can look into to reading about that. Thank you, Tyler. That's great. Let's see here. I think we had a question from Lucas.
It was pretty freaky, Mike. In this book, there's a moment where they take rugby kickers and they throw them into a drowning car, and they want them to get over their fear. And the Navy SEALs teach these athletes how to get over their fear.
Wow.
And it's really cool. So the kids will like it. The different exercises you can go through.
Good stuff. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure lots of them will look into that. That's great. Lucas, did you have a question?
Yes, sir. I was just going to ask, I'm going into university, I'm looking at teaching. What do you think is a good trait to have as a coach that really like helps your students?
The number one thing that I was doing the coach 3 today, and the number one thing in coaching is that you treat each player like an individual. Like I said, you find out what makes them special. You have to have your core values, some things that are must-haves that have to be there. Of course, the fundamentals, but you got to really respect the person for who they are, and then you can put your must-haves on top of that. And another thing is it depends on what type of coaching you want to go into. If it's participation and just recreation, make them have fun. If it's high performance, then it's you have to have a lot of care and a lot of those other attributes I discussed before.
Well, that's a really good answer. Good stuff. Yeah, treat each player as an individual, aside from your things that you're of course.
Well, Mike, I used to go to Tennis Canada. I mean, I work for Tennis Canada, and one of the goals we're trying to create here is not to have a cookie cutter system for the players. It's like, yes, we made a Bianca, but at that time I had one of my players there named Brintha, and we made a Bianca, which is fantastic, a US Open champion. But maybe instead of being, as I told Tennis Canada today, instead of being so happy making one Bianca, you maybe could have had 5. If we would have treated everyone like an individual, Anka, Maria Tanescu, Brintha, Arsenal, whoever's there, then we maybe would have had 5 on the tour, not just 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Question, I think this is a good question from Anna here that I'm reading. She says, what are the training differences when we have a big tournament coming up versus when there are no big important tournaments at that time? So first of all, do you train your players differently when they have an important tournament coming up? And if so, how would you train them differently?
How old is this girl?
I'm not sure. Like we have an Anna at our club, and she'd be 12. I don't know if the Anna. Oh, 13. Yes. Okay. There we go.
You know, so that's a challenging. 13's challenging. So if it's an under 12 player, I don't think there's any peaks in your schedule. Obviously, in saying that, the unfortunate world of tennis is you do have to perform at times, and it is important to do well in tournaments so that you get sometimes you get funding from Tennis Canada. And you get different opportunities. Now, if that's your number one objective, and I've had players that was their number one objective, winning under 12 nationals, and nothing happened after that, and because they knew they were going to get help from Tennis Canada or get to go to special trips, but that was it for them. So it's very important to the person to understand that to me, winning under 12 really doesn't mean much to me unless, you played the right way. You being 13, now you're moving to 14. I mean, you're still developing your game style. It's a catch-22 because you want to develop your game, but you still have to kind of be there. So like Bianca, for example, she didn't dominate under 12. She didn't really dominate under 14s. Later, she started to dominate, but she was in that group of players that you could still see. So it's a tough balance of developing your game style and still being in that group of players that are being recognized. In saying that, I use Erica. I mean, she developed very late. I mentioned to you Erica Dimitrov. I mean, I think her best days are ahead of her. She's going to college. I think she's one of the few females that are going to do better after she finishes college before going there. So I mean, it's never too late to be a pro and to be great. I made that mistake. I told the girl she wasn't going to be pro once, and she proved me wrong. That I was coaching. It's tough. It's a tough balance, and there's so many things that go into the balance. It's your coach. Sometimes the parents get involved. Sometimes parents put a lot of pressure on the kids that they want that under 12 trophy or they want the under 10 prize money. So you got to put your priorities there. I think sometimes you have to have more long-term goals and think about where your game's going to be later in life.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, a lot of good little stories there and things that we can relate to from the past for sure.
Like Mike, I was coaching Carol Zhao, and I mean, she's 5'3", right, or at best. And she was with Louise at the time, so I had two girls, Louise Kwong, and I had Carol Zhao. And I don't know if they still have rookie tournaments, like 1-star tournaments. Carol Zhao, when she was 10, she couldn't win a set in a first round of a rookie tournament. The girl ended up going to Stanford. She's won a challenger. I told her, I don't think you can be pro. You're too small, and you don't even win a set. This is when I had no certification. I had no knowledge. I've only been coaching for 2 years, and I was lucky to stumble on these two players. It was really hard for me because Carol Zhao couldn't win a set under 10, under 12. She later got to about 250 in the world, I think, Mike, is that correct? And around there?
Yeah. Yep.
And Louise Kwong went to nationals under 12, and she won the finals, love in the finals, and lost 4 games the entire tournament. Louise Kwong became a good player as well, but it's like I said, what I've learned is I don't judge too early. I won't tell someone 5'3" that they can't be pro, because anything can happen as long as you work hard and you have good ethics and you have all those skills we said you need to have. But yeah, don't worry about, it's too many players worrying about being great under 12. That's not when you win Wimbledon, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that it's really important that at a young age they try to develop that all court style and they become comfortable in all parts of the court, and they play kind of a complete style of tennis so that as they get older that they feel confident doing that. And I think Carol's a great example of that. I remember Carol too. I mean, she was, like you said, she was always very small, but she wasn't fearful when it came to coming into the net or hitting approach shots, or she kind of played that all court style, and she had a good head on her shoulders, and so things worked out in the end for her. So yeah.
And obviously, we know I have kids that were playing hockey before, and I found this incredible thing when my son was playing very high level hockey, and Team Canada, it's something everyone should know here, and I told this to Tennis Canada today. Team Canada won the under 12. Our hockey's are one of our top sports in our country, obviously. They won the under 12 championships, Team Canada, and when they came back to Canada, they fired the coach. This is Hockey Canada. So they fired the coach when they won the gold medal. What the heck did they do that for? Because they played like kids, they didn't play like professionals. And Hockey Canada said, if we want to make professionals, I don't care you won the gold under 12. We want you to play the right way, and we don't mind you losing. So that's okay to lose as long as you play the right way. So that's just something we can take from hockey.
That's awesome. We have a couple of questions in the chat about preparation for a match. So somebody was asking, how do you prepare your players before they play a match? And somebody asked, like, how do you motivate your players? Somebody asked, how do you prepare your players? So maybe you can kind of talk to us about the process you use. And is it different maybe or maybe it's maybe it's not different, but let's say you have a, an 11-year-old at the under 12 nationals, or let's say you're at an ITF with Jada. What process do you go through in order to prepare these players to play their best?
Well, I mean, first, like I mentioned to you, it has to be individualized. You have to know your player. In the case, if you know the player, I think that you have to keep a very similar routine. I think that you have to, you know what you've done going in, and you can't become something that you're not. I'll never forget being down in Florida, Mike, and Land's down there. And Land's a top coach in Alberta. She's developed great players, world-class players. And one of her players was playing, and she was pulling off this upset. And her player hit this amazing shot down the line, and she pumped her fist, and Land's yelling at her through the fence, "You can't play that way. That's not your game." So it blew my mind because it was a great shot. But what I took from that is like, going into the match, you know your brand, you know your label, you know what you're supposed to do. My job is to remind you of that, give you little tips maybe on your opponent. But I feel like a lot of the coaches talk so much about the opponent now that they forget their own player. I'm concerned about my player taking it to the other person, and I think about 85% of the talk should be about what my player is going to do well to win. I listen to some of the coaches like 50-50, or sometimes it's even more about the opponent. So I prepare my player. I mean, obviously you do a physical warm-up, but part of that physical warm-up before is also talking to them about what they plan on doing in the match. I let them talk, because it's very important to let the player talk. I find, like right now, I'm talking so much. I like to hear what the player has to say, because that's when the coach learns so much about their player before the match and after the match. Let them talk first. Because some of them do go blank. They totally forget what they're going to do. I'll tell you a quick story. I had Daniela Volo, who is, I used to call her the volcano because she had such a temper. She actually won her school won yesterday. But
Awesome.
I used to have this Craig O'Shaughnessy, and I know Pierre Lamarche, and I know Mike are following Craig O'Shaughnessy's tactics. And I remember her being in tournaments, and when things weren't going well, she just flipped through that, the consistency, the direction, play high-low, play slice. She was going through every single tactic, and you can't do everything. You got to go with what you do well. I tell my players, you got to have two weapons. I talk about their weapons. I talk about their strengths before the match. And that's I feel it's going to give them the most confidence. And that's another thing I forgot to mention. If you want to play pro tennis, you got to have two weapons at a minimum. And I talk more about what my player is going to do with their weapons, and and like I said, it's very individual.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, that, some players, they want a little bit more information. They want to talk more, they want more tactics. And then you get some players that maybe don't feel so comfortable with so much information. You got to give them, like you said, maybe it's just one thing, maybe it's two things. You keep it a little bit more simple. I mean, I remember being at a tournament with maybe you remember, like Alex Mikhailuk, I think.
Yeah.
She played against some of your players, and it's like, she was a ball of stress before the match. And it's like, I told her a joke before the match, and that was the only thing I really did. And then she laughed, and then she went and played the match, and she played great. And she came off the court and she said, "Whoa, I've never felt so good going into a match before." So, it's like some kids, it's got to be very individualized. And as you know, it's like you just get a feel for what they're like that morning. And you do the best you can. So
what I remember about her is I definitely put her under the perfectionist category.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing 18 nationals, and she's like, "Did you watch my match? I'm not even her coach." And I was like, "Well, I saw bits and pieces of it. We have 24 players there."
Yeah.
And she's like, "What do you think about this?" I go, "Well, go speak to Mike. He's your coach. I'm not going to give you this feedback in the middle of 18." She goes, "I want to know." And this is when a girl that was fighting through an injury, she couldn't even finish the under 18 nationals, and she wanted to know about her serve. And she was on court 5 at Mayfair. I could barely see her. So I was like, yeah, but that's what you need. You need those ingredients to be a professional tennis player. You got to care that much. And
yeah, that's for sure. I think it's really important that these kids are kind of hungry for the information, hungry for the feedback, and hungry to constantly improve. So I think those kind of qualities are always special.
Yeah.
It is 6 o'clock and we
Wow.
kind of promised to just go to 6. So I just wanted to thank you for doing this. I mean, for
Thank
me,
you.
it's always great to speak to individuals like yourself that are knowledgeable and have been involved in the sport for so long and give so much to the kids that they're involved with. So thank you again for doing this. And I really hope that everybody was able to take as much out of this as I was today.
And next time I'll try and get my my mic or my screen working properly.
No, it's okay. You'll make me look bad if you do that. So
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mike, for having me.
all right, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Hope
Thank
to
you.
see you guys soon on the court.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.